Okay, cool. All right. So, welcome everyone. So, this is the fifth session of Wezesha. And Carl, just for you, Wezesha basically means like there's no true direct translation for it, but it translates loosely to empower people, to enable people, to put things in place where people can feel empowered. And for us, what this means specifically for me is creating a platform where we can provide resources, information, opportunity, so people can come out feeling that they know more, they're better able to make decisions. So the first series of talks was this corporate versus self-employed. So we brought in 4 entrepreneurs, we brought them week over week. And so today we're bringing you in to help sort of be the capstone for this set of sessions, out of which some people may decide corporate is still for them. Some people may say, wow, self-employment is what I want. And so I'm hoping out of all of this, we'll have some people who perhaps have been sort of borderline on the fence, but haven't had enough information to make a decision, but now they have enough information to make a decision. So, having said that, let me get us started on the next one, which is this set of sessions and talks is sponsored by BBI Design Solutions. This is something very personal for both me and for Carl, because Carl was really helped us acquire this business. BBI Design Solutions is a full-service interior design firm providing design solutions for builders, homeowners, and trade partners. Several of you have been part of Wawa's work. Either she's done remodeling for your homes or she's done some redesign for your home. So as you think about this year, consider using BBI Design Solutions. So today I'm honored to host Karl Barham, as part of Transworld Business Advisors, which is the largest business brokerage firm in the world. Karl helps people buy and sell businesses. So I know some of you are thinking about buying businesses, acquiring businesses. Some of you already have businesses and are thinking of exiting. So this is why this session was set up for you. Karl also has 20 years of professional business experience. We've talked in the previous sessions about how corporate employment really helps accelerate your learning curve when you go into business. So we're hoping we'll ask him questions about that. He was a corporate employee like me, team corporate, and many of you who are still team corporate. Woohoo! Yeah, we are still here. So we'll hear about his experiences in the corporate world. And most importantly, the combination of all this makes him the capstone person for us to help us figure out, are we still team corporate? Are we team self-employed? Are we sort of a hybrid? And for those ready to make a move, Karl's going to be the person who can help us make that move. So Karl, welcome and thank you so much for joining us in this session today.
Thank you for having me. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I'm going to, if it's okay, and I might be breaking with tradition here, but I would like to share and tell me if my screen is coming up, if everyone could see the screen. And is everyone seeing the screen okay?
Yes, we can, sir.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that introduction. And the first thing I'd say is I am you, and I was exactly where you are today, many of you that are working for corporate. I spent most of my professional career working for other people in corporations. I used to joke to my friends, I started with a large corporation and I kept trying to downsize the size of the corporation until I ended up with my own. The first company I worked with was General Motors. You might have heard of them, GM. At the time, they were north of $180 billion in sales worldwide company. I later moved on to a company called Eaton, which is kind of a small mini GE, and they were about $26 billion in sales. And then I moved to a company called Acuity Brands that's famous for lighting fixtures, and they were about $4 billion. The next company was my own. And I assure you, we were not a $1 billion company, and there's a lot of difference in that. But one of the things I want to share with you is you could take all of that experience that you've had over the past many years of your career, and why not apply it for yourself? And so I went through a personal decision process looking at what do I want, my legacy to be when I'm done with my professional career? And I looked, there was nothing about a corner office or getting a nice, beautiful Rolex watch, if you're lucky at the end of your career, that sounded appealing to me. And when I had to do some soul searching and praying, I saw something that spoke to me about two things. One, how do I build legacies that live beyond my time here, that my children and family can enjoy, and legacy through wealth, especially in our community, is a really important thing. And those of us that have been blessed with a great education and opportunities to work in big companies, we have a skill set, an education experience that allows us an opportunity to build wealth in a different way that impacts our community. And so I thought I wanted to be part of that. And part of it is by doing it yourself, trying to do it yourself. And secondly, how do you help other people do that? I don't know if any of you saw the movie The Matrix some years ago, but I always remembered a scene called where Morpheus, a character that gives Neo a choice. And he decided whether he wanted to take the red pill and the blue pill. If you remember, the red pill, the blue pill, excuse me, allowed for you to keep the status quo. You stayed in the matrix and you lived in bliss. You didn't know what was happening in the real world. You were comfortable. You were in your status quo, and many, many people wanted to just stay in the matrix. All your needs were provided for, and it was comfortable and safe. The red pill takes you out of the matrix. You're going to see the real world. And in this movie, the real world wasn't pretty. It wasn't easy. It was difficult. But you could see the world as it really is. My question for everybody today, are you ready to take the red pill, or you want to be comfortable with the blue pill? Blue pill it expresses ignorance of what is possible out there. The red pill, and what I like to talk about, is what's really out there. What is the potential? So this concept of entrepreneur, I want to be clear what we're talking about. Sometimes definition of terms mixes things up. If you are working for somebody, for today's conversation, you are an employee. That means you're deploying your time, knowledge, and expertise to help someone else, some organization, do better. It is a perfectly acceptable and a great way to live a life. Many people, probably 80% of people on this planet, work for other people. And it's great for many people to be able to do that. An entrepreneur, what's different is there's a person who's is willing to assume, number one, the risk of loss, which is kind of like taking the red pill, in order to make money. Now, I'm not saying you can't be in a social entrepreneur or intra-entrepreneurship in a large company, but this concept of risking money to start a venture to make money is a unique thing that people that are entrepreneurs do. So the first mindset shift you have to start thinking about is, are you ready to take a risk? Now, to do that, doing a self-assessment of who you are and knowing yourself is really important. Some people are just better off being an employee. And there's a difference. An employee is comfortable with getting instructions and following others' lead in exchange for, in some cases, incredible amounts of money.
Yeah.
And at the end of their time, they're more than comfortable in earning salaries and putting it into retirements and saving, and they do fine in life. But an entrepreneur, he's an owner. He's risking it all. And the upside of that, and if you think of somebody like Warren Buffett, the upside in ownership is really generating increased wealth. There's kind of two ways of thinking of an employee versus a business owner when I think of it. Employee gives you an income and job security. When you go down the destination of being an owner, you are a shareholder of one. First, you get to control your own destiny. Second, you have the best influence in being able to impact your community. You're creating jobs, you're hiring, you're servicing people, you're creating new products and services that can be tailored to your particular customer groups. It helps you with the ability to become financial independent. Now, I hope everybody on this call one day reaches true financial independence. But if you don't know what that is, that's when you don't have to work. You have enough money and income producing streams of money that you actually don't have to work. Now, you would think, how can I do that? How am I going to make money if I don't work? Shareholders don't work, they invest. In some cases, it's their own business. Some cases, it's stock or real estate. But their assets that they have invested is producing the income, not their time and labor. And if you look over the history of the world, that is one of the main ways that people have generated legacy wealth. Now I'm going to pause there for a second, and I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. I want to see if I can get that to stop sharing. Did it stop? Okay, there we go. I wanted to make sure journey is really talking about, what are you passionate about? How do you know what it is that you should be doing your call to do and what kind of mindset? Now, I'll share my own personal story as an example, but I could tell you my process that may be helpful for you.
Yeah.
What I built and decided to do in business brokerage, I saw an opportunity in the market because I went out there looking to buy a business. And I probably wanted to be my own boss for a really, probably crazy reason. My wife and I decided to have a family and kids. And I had the type of job where I traveled all over the world. Probably in the year 2007 through 2012, I logged 150,000 miles a year, traveling the world, visiting customers and different sites. And it was a great way to see the world, and I got to do a lot of fun things. When I started looking forward in my life, I said, I don't know that I wanted to have that kind of lifestyle if I was having a young family. So I wanted something that was going to keep me closer to home. 2, I wanted the ability to build something where the time and effort I put in, and I worked 60 hours a week and 70 hours a week, and I was a company man. But when I started looking, I would win contracts and deals worth billions of dollars for the companies that I worked.
Mm-hmm.
And every year, I'd get a 5% pay raise, and I'd maybe get a bonus that was really great, and it might have been a 6-figure bonus. But compared to the value I was creating to the company, it was pennies. I said, well, if I'm going to work so hard, why not do something that allows me to benefit for myself? And 3rd, I wanted the challenge of seeing if I could create something for myself. And that's the foundation of most entrepreneurs. So business brokerage was we got into because we were trying to find and acquire a small business ourselves. I had done mergers and acquisitions at large companies, and I wanted to do that for myself at a small scale. But I didn't know what I was doing. Buying a small company is vastly different than buying large companies. Just the sellers and the owners of the businesses are different. The way that businesses are valued and how deals are structured are different. So I started thinking it would be a great idea to start a business that helped people acquire businesses. And I found Transworld, who, as part of my market research, I said, let's see who's doing that out there in the industry. What's the competitive landscape look like? And I said, look, there's a whole group of people that are doing this, and there's a company that's doing this better than others, and I don't have to start from scratch. And so my wife and I, Ann, decided to go down this path. Now, the customers we deal with are small business owners in our community. They're the people that are the parents of the kids that my children go to school with. There are people in the community. So every day I get to work with business owners and learning their struggles and their challenges. And the way I measure success is at the end of the day, if I do my job well, like today, we had a closing, a buyer and a seller met together, and I fulfilled the dreams of one. A business owner was able to exit their business and move on to something else and get a nice check for it. And I helped with the dreams of the other, someone entering into their first business on a path where they can continue to grow. So when I have success, my measure is I have 2 happy people who probably for the rest of my days won't forget my name, won't forget how I and while we do it, got a nice check for that.
Karl, like as I'm thinking about, thanks for that. Thanks for sharing your personal story. I think it's very consistent with what we've heard over the last 4 weeks, right? The red pill, blue pill analogy, that's spot on. You have people like me who last week I was called out as being culturally shackled, right? Grew up being told you have to get a job, you have to get a job. And I'm still 30 years later, I'm still working, waiting for that Rolex in that corner office, right? So I'm shackled culturally to that. Whereas, as you know, Peggy, right, for her, she's imaginative, innovative, and wants to run her business. So one of the questions I have for you and things that have come up a lot is there's a perception that there's safety in corporate employment. I hear you laughing because, yeah, even today people are getting laid off. So layoffs are real, right? But I'm thinking about myself in your situation. I've been working, 30 years, like I said, and I've done different roles over the 30 years. And I'm at a point where I'm not scared when I start a new role. Like I can dive in, I can create teams, I can lead teams, I can disband teams. I can cold call everyone, once I start my new gig, my new role, I can bring people together, I can strategize, I can do all that. But I'm so scared when you talk about self-employment. Like that is just, I feel like I'm jumping into some place without a safety net, right? So and a lot of people share those same sentiments where in the corporate world, even with the risks, they can do it. But in the self-employment, there's just something there's a dissonance. Help me sort of bridge that gap and perhaps also bring it to that cultural shackles that we as immigrants have in the US, perhaps.
Absolutely. My family's from Jamaica. I'm first generation born here, and in Jamaica, my family was farmers. They own a farm, and they were farmers there. They moved here and they got jobs. And one of the things in a lot of the countries in the Caribbean and Africa, education is high up there. So you got to get a job, get a good education, and you find out that you get a good job that pays well, and that's what your parents program into you. We did not grow up the sons and children of the Trumps of the world, whether you like them or don't like them, or these investors and business owners. I've met so many people that are children of business owners. They're not afraid. They grew up with it. It was second nature. So that's something you've got to recognize that we may have. Your parents have built into you security, getting a job, and so on. And so that's good. But you mentioned, I would say until about my 30s, I thought I was good at what I did. I got promotions and people said, you can do more and would promote me. And I really did feel for a while, and I'm Black and American, by the way. I have an engineering degree. So, everybody was hiring at the time in the early 90s. And I worked for these big companies, name companies. GM at the time was one of the largest companies, etc. I felt protected. I said, what? I could get a job anywhere.
Yeah.
If they didn't like me, I'll go somewhere else. People throw money, and they kind of did. But I looked at this one graph one time, and I saw what engineers made. And they start off with really high incomes, and then they show it goes up, and then it starts to level out. And so my question to you, what's that leveling out? So I would look at the older engineers in their 50s and 60s, and they were at that level out spot. What happens is their salary is high, and their life is changing, and they've got knowledge and expertise. But these young folks are coming along with new skills, AI, whatever the new thing is, the internet. And so they're quickly starting to sweat. Literally, you could see them sweating of becoming obsolete. And so what I will tell you, as good as you think you are, as good as you think your company needs you, that next generation that's chasing you down is coming for your job. And the companies at the end of the day, I used to describe it, don't you wish you got a job offer that was a guaranteed contract like in the NBA or football? They said, I'm going to pay you for 20 years, $1 million. So if they fire you, you still get $1 million. Now raise your hand if you got that kind of contract at your job. You don't. And so understand that the company can make a change for 1,000 reasons. And do you want your destination, your livelihood, your children's future controlled by the whims of a fickle manager? Your manager gets changed if someone comes in and they just don't like the way you look at them. So that's something, as a burning platform, I started seeing that, and I had to start preparing myself for the leap. And I know it's going to be scary, but here's the funny thing that no one tells you. Take the leap, whether you successful or fail, that education, that experience, you can always go back and get a job if you need to.
A couple of weeks ago, one of the Jane Mukami, who's a fit Kenyan girl, she had a tech company. I mean, she worked in tech, and then she started two businesses. One's a fitness business, and the other is actually a social networking, building business, right? And she said the exact same thing: prepare yourself for your leap. Education's not going away; you'll still have it. If you feel like you have a backup, if you feel like you need a backup plan, you can always come back. So I think there's something interesting that everyone is saying. Two things particularly. One is make that move, like make the decision, right? Don't linger around, make the decision. The second thing that people have said, and I'm curious to hear your take on it, is use a step function to get away from corporate into self-employment. To the extent that you can build runaway, whether it's funds. And I'd like to hear, you told me about the 25,000. So I want to hear about that. But was there a plan that you set in motion that said in X months, in X months, in X years, I will exit and I will execute on being self-employed?
Yeah. I think some people are blessed with fortune, lucky. You just come up with the right product, or you go into the right business at the right time, and luck had it. One of the things I learned in corporate America, the bosses, the CEO, did not depend on luck. He did not pay me for luck. He said, I want performance regardless of luck. And so we had to plan. We submitted a business plan, was reviewed, was beat up, and then you had to execute against it. And so that mindset, using your personal life. I started planning for my exit from corporate America in 1995. And you know when I started? When I got my first check at GM. I had a lady named Dorothy Gogol, was a mentor of mine during my college days. And she used to work for General Motors, and she got retired, and she worked at the university helping mentor engineering students. And she explained her job every time she saw people get downsized or lost jobs or displaced. She told me that before I started working. So I went into my first job with this fear of this event. So I always wanted to make sure that I had skills and able to be able to pivot. So my first check that I got from GM, I walked into the bank at the time, and I went to deposit it. Biggest check I ever got in my life. Coming out of college, I was living on ramen noodles and those kind of life. And there was a lady in an office, and the office had financial planner on it. And I walked into the office, and I just got my first check. Any advice on what I should do? She sat down, spent 20 minutes, and she took my check and she split it into about 4 different pieces. And she said, you're going to put this much into retirement, you're going to put this much into saving, and you're going to live on this much because you're a student and you know how to live on this much already. And I didn't listen. I didn't argue with her. I did what she said. So I started saving from the age of 21, money putting aside. And you know what she said? She said, one day you'll thank me. When I went to go get my first house and I needed a down payment for it, I had the money. When I decided to propose to my wife and needed to buy an expensive ring, I had the money. When I needed to go start my first business, I had the money. I started saving and putting away money years and years and years to build up enough when I took the leap that I can pay all of my living expenses for at least a year to 2 years. That takes away the fear. If you got downsized and lost a job, you might take 6 months to find a new one anyway. But let me tell you the hack, the trick. Here's the update to that. Everyone on this call at some point may face downsizing. I'm telling you straight. Your company may come and ask you, do you want to be on the list? They may just come and take your check away from you. But at some point, they're going to do it. But if you work for a large company, they typically have this thing called severance. I learned that you should wait for that day to come with excitement. You're ready when, and I'll tell you, I did this myself by accident. But the day that I left corporate America, I had already decided what business I was going to do. I started paperwork. I had to get a license. I got a license. And the company I was with kept doing cuts. And for 2 years, they never cut me. Everyone else in my department get cut. And I'm the only one left. And so I'm like, damn it, these people are never going to let me go. And I'm not going to get a severance. So I signed up for training that I had to go to. And I was about to turn in my 2 weeks notice to the company so that I had to go to this training. And my boss calls me into the HR office and says, Karl, we're restructuring and your position is no longer there. You don't understand how I was trying to hold back the joy and not jump out of the seat. And this is what planning looks like. She asked me, you got to turn in your badge and your credit card and all of this stuff. And someone will escort you to your office to get your personal items as we walk you out the door.
Yeah.
I gave her everything. I said, you don't have to go back. I don't have anything in there. I can just leave. And I walked out the door, and on my drive home, I called my wife Ann. I said, you have no idea what just happened. They just let me go with a huge severance package. And I was ready to quit without it. And so what I tell all my friends, and since I've started this 5 years, I have 10 people that I told the same thing to. And when their company came calling, they were ready and they bought a business within 3 months of exiting corporate America because they were ready. They had the cash to help them. They had a plan, and they even knew exactly what business they were going to buy or start.
Okay. Now you have me excited because I've been the unfortunate person. Well, I was laid off once in 2001. But when I was in Verizon for 16, almost 17 years, and we had multiple layoffs. And I was never picked. And people were making so much money from the severance, right? When I moved from Verizon to Google, a year after I resigned from Verizon and joined Google, they gave a package, right? So I missed out on that package, right? So, but maybe God was telling me something that after I talked to Karl and go through this series of self-employment versus corporate employment, I should start going down on my knees daily and praying for the day that my severance comes.
Absolutely. Volunteer. Like literally, I would go to my boss and ask, this guy just had a kid. Maybe, I mean, I'll take the hit. I would try as politely. You can't ask for it directly. It's kind of odd, but I would, offer it, and they would never do it. But the key is it doesn't work because I will tell you the feeling, even though I was ready to go, it's a gut punch. People's confidence are shook, and they automatically want to start thinking about grabbing on to a new job.
Yes.
So if you don't, when you let loose something, let go. If you're not ready to know what you're going to grab onto, you're going to revert back to safety, and you're going to go to those corporate recruiters that they set you up with, and you're going to start interviewing for jobs. And guess what? You're good. You're going to get another offer. And you're going to say, look, this offer is right here. It's not the perfect job, but I'm going to take it. But if you already know what you want to do next, and you've got the pieces ready for it, when that opportunity presents itself, you'll have no problem moving on to the next. I'll share one thing. You mentioned the number $24,000. I will tell you, when you're considering going on entrepreneur, the number you want to remember is $24,000 is the difference between you starting or going off on your own, or you're going back to a W-2 job. You know what $24,000 represent? That is what in Obamacare, the marketplace, for the gold platinum plan for a family of 4 is about planning about $2,000 a month. So that's $24,000 a year for you to get a healthcare plan that is approximately equivalent to whatever your corporation has been offering you. The difference is in the corporation, it's heavily subsidized. So you might be paying in your paycheck, if you look at it, anywhere between $300 to $400 for your entire family, and the company pays the rest, or they get discount. When you're a small business owner, you don't have that advantage, and that's the truth. And so when people think about it, they start looking at all the numbers. 24, you need to find a business that's going to generate $24,000 more, plus whatever you did in retirement, if you want, your 401ks and so on, more than the money you made as an employee. So let me do the math. Let's say you made $100,000 in your job and you maxed out your 401k and you did all the normal things. If you were to look at an opportunity that was going to return to you $125,000, economically, the two decisions are virtually equal.
Got it.
And so if you could quantify the risk of what if I get sick, what if I need healthcare, you've got to put a number on it, and it's not as scary. If you could put a number on it, so if you find a business that's more than that, you know you can get the same healthcare you had at your company, you can put into your 401k the same way in your own company. And I'll tell you a little hint. If you own your business, you actually have more tax advantages that would lower your tax burden than if you were an employee to a company. That's a whole nother session to get into that. So think of it simply this way. If you can make more money working for yourself, $25,000 or more than you make now, economically, you'll see no difference.
So, so we've gone through a few things. I want to sort of like bucketize them just in my head so that I can make sure I'm caught up with you, right? So there's the mindset shift, right? There's the recognition. First of all, there's a recognition of red pill, blue pill. Really loved that, right? The recognition of the safety in being in corporate versus the risk of being in sort of like the real world. There's the practicality of being in business and the legacy that it's going to leave for yourself and your kids and future generations. And then there's the friction that comes with the cultural shackles that we have. Some of them imposed by ourselves, just naturally, we want safety, we seek predictability. Others are just like generational, and we need to break those shackles, right? So I'm with you so far, and you know, I'm shifting my mindset. I'm starting to think about, okay, there's actually ways this can happen. The biggest concern a lot of us have in America is healthcare. You've addressed that. So then the next thing I'm going to ask you is this. So and now I'm kind of ready, and some of these people here on the call are. And okay, what kind of business do we get? You said something very interesting. You talked about passion. But then I know in a couple of sessions you and I have attended, there's some people who acquire businesses strictly because they are good money-making businesses, even though they're not something I'm passionate about or I know really a lot about. So tell us about some of those clients you meet whose primary goal is just to acquire business that makes money.
So you remember we started off and I wanted to give the visual of that slide about what an entrepreneur is and Warren Buffett. So Warren Buffett is a hero of mine. I've watched him. If you looked at the types of business that Warren Buffett owns, he owns C Candy maker, manufacturer. He owns an insurance company in his portfolio. He has the most eclectic groups of company in there. I mean, he may like candy a lot, but not enough to buy a candy company. But I'm going to suggest to everybody, the things you like and enjoy, you have my full permission to be an avid customer of those businesses for the rest of your life. But when you're making an investment decision, and that's what a business is, it's an investment decision. I want you to dust off the old textbooks you have and start going back to first print. An entrepreneur takes a risk to make money. So if your passion happens to also be very profitable and makes money, great business. But I would never take. So I have people that have acquired fitness businesses, like specialty boutique fitness businesses like yoga.
Yeah.
Yoga is fabulous. Those people are hardcore. They love it, and they pay a good amount of money. You could get $250 a month from a person for unlimited membership. But let me tell you about yoga and the economics of it. You could only fill up the class with so many people. You need instructors for those classes. So that's people that are paid to instruct the class. You got to have a good location. So there's going to be rent, typically in a retail location that's high. Look at the economics of that business. What if you wanted to grow it 10 times? You're limited by the size of your studio. So now you've got to spend more capital to get a second studio and scale. I'm not saying yoga business is a bad business. I'm just saying, is it scalable? Is it makes enough money to replace the salary, even if you're passionate? So when you look at a business, you want to look at it in its principle. Does it generate cash flow? I'll give you a hint on what businesses do. The next time you walk around into a business, a place of business, retail location, anywhere, look around at all the things in that location that may need service or products that you don't notice. One of the most profitable businesses, I'll give you an example. If anybody's ever seen of the gentlemen that when you're going through a construction site, they're the folks that hold the flag that says stop and go.
Yeah. Yeah.
You would never notice. I don't think anyone on this call woke, when they were a kid, dreamed of being in traffic control. But let me tell you about the business model. You hire relatively low labor people, low skill people that you might pay $15 to $17, $18 an hour and are pretty interchangeable. You train them on safety and how to turn the flag, stop and go. And then you deploy them to every construction site that's doing gas work or road work and so on. Now, what you don't know is by law and code, the contractors that are doing that work must have these safety people there. Now, if you were doing gas work and you had high paid plumbers that you pay $70 an hour to go dig up gas lines and fix it, which one of those guys you want to stand out there holding that flag going back and forth? None of them. You want them in the ground doing the work. So they hire a company to put those people out there, and they're required for every job by code, and they're paying them only labor. There's no material costs. It's just service. They show up with a truck. They stand there for 8 hours. They pay them a little bit, and they're able to charge a high price for that. I describe that because no one's going to come to me looking for that business necessarily. Yeah. But that business, if you think about it, what is that business fundamentally? It's kind of an HR job. It's an HR business. Your ability to hire and retain low-skilled labor to stand on corners and turn a flag. That's the skill set. So if you've got that skill set in your job, if you've managed people, frontline people, if you were in the military and you've dealt with people, if you were on teams and were captain of your team and you know how to deal and motivate people and hold people accountable, you've got the skill set to own a traffic control company that can make $10 million a year and generate $3 to $4 million in cash flow a year. So I describe it because I want you to break your thinking about companies that you enjoy the business with to be good. You could enjoy serving people and find a company that allows you to serve people, whatever the industry is, and be good at it.
Wow. I think yeah, because a lot of us, I'll say a lot of us because I don't want to be the only one saying this, right? Is we feel very strongly that our passion and our purpose should determine the investment decision we make for the business that we're looking for. And I had this conversation with some friends of mine. This was like 20 years ago, and people are like, we should get like McDonald's franchise, I think was what we're talking about. And then, I said, but who eats McDonald's? Like, I don't eat McDonald's. And then one of my friends said, I bet you the ones with multi, franchise, McDonald's franchise do not eat at McDonald's. So just the fact that you own McDonald's doesn't mean that you have to eat at McDonald's. And that was like a little change for me, because I was like, wow, okay. I think going back to the cultural shackle, yes, it is absolutely, it would be a match made in heaven if what you do and what you feel you're purposeful about is the same investment decision you make for a business. But you're telling me this construction business, what did you call it? Traffic control business? Because I see them
Traffic control
everywhere. I see them
everywhere.
everywhere. And I
And there's
remember
only
when
a
we had
few companies that only a few companies do that in any particular city. There's maybe five of them in five or six of the major ones in all of Georgia. And they own all of it, because you have to be trained. You have to know how to read signs and set up packed traffic routes. And the contracts for that are given if Georgia Power hires a contract to do work. What happens is they go and say, when I'm quoted for it, they go to the traffic control company, says, I'm going to need 7 crews of 2 for 24 months to be there when I need it. So when it rains, no one's there. But if it doesn't rain, and they can't start the work without them. So that means they'll lose money if they don't have those. So what you need is dependable people that will be there when they have to. If they're not there, they don't. Little fly-by-night places, maybe the employees show up, maybe they don't. It costs money and they don't get hired again. But if you deliver good service in that, they don't care how much it costs. They'll pay you $1,000 a day, 2,000, if you're there, so they can do the work, so they can make 100,000.
Yeah.
And so that business model, and when you're looking at investment, you got to think about the business model that matters. And that's how. Now, once you figure out I'm good at service, or maybe I like a product, or I like to do transportation, you can then find the industries and verticals within that make sense for you, that you know something about, or you could apply skills and experiences you have into those areas.
Perfect. So let me
Oh,
switch gears.
can I share another quick example of a business? You're never going to hear of this business. We recently helped an entrepreneur acquire a doula training business. Anybody know what a doula is? Kind of like a midwife.
Yeah.
And the founder created a business where if you chose to use a doula and you had to find one, how do you know if they're trained and certified? There is no national certification for doulas. This founder created that. She certified them, trained them, and when you were a member of her organization, you were certified and trained. So if someone was doing, they can go and search, and you can present your certification. And she would make north of $300,000 a year operating an online system where she does 2 things. She provides training and she does certification. She worked maybe 5 to 10 hours in this business. So the entrepreneur that bought it was a doula, and she was part of the training for there. And the opportunity came up for her to acquire this business, and this business will throw $200,000 to $300,000 additional cash flow in her pocket every month, and might take her 10 hours a week to manage.
Is that business on sale, Carl? I think that's right down my alley over there. I wouldn't mind that amount of money for 10 hours work. Wow. So Carl, I think so we have folks here who perhaps haven't gone through what you and I went through in terms of the business acquisition and sort of like the milestones and checklists. So do you have like a brief, maybe what are the 5, 6, 7 things that people who have now, after listening to you, they've made the decision. They're like, okay, I'm ready. I'm gonna call Carl tomorrow to acquire my business. What's sort of like the checklist, high level checklist that they need to have?
Yeah, so the first thing is, and it's always going to come back, is getting your money right. The first thing is you do your own self-assessment. So I highly recommend, if you do not have a financial planner, that you develop a financial plan for your life. You could do it yourself. You can go online. You can read a book. You can have someone do it for you. I don't care how you do it. But before you make the choice of jumping into owning a business, you need to understand, how does owning a business fit into your investment portfolio for your life? So I'll tell you what you need to look at. You need an income stream for every year for the next few years to pay for all your family expenses. You're going to have kids going to private school and college. You have to buy groceries. You're going to have a car every 3 to 5 years. You want to renovate your house. You're going to buy a bigger house. You're going to take family vacations. You need to map all of that out on paper and see how much do you really need to live. And you might already know that and have a budget and have a good idea of that. But then you also need to know, what are the milestones? A good financial plan would say, in 15 years, I may need to have a retirement home for my mother. And that might cost $4,000 a month. So in year 30, 35, I will start having a $4,000 expense show up that I have to account for. That's how detailed that plan can do. And if you use a financial planner, they got software, they do it easily for you. And the reason you need to understand that, it tells you how much money you need to make from the business. It will tell you how big a business you need to buy. And the net worth calculation that they do, looking at your assets and your liabilities for yourself, will tell you how much cash you have or have access to invest in a business. That's going to set your criteria, your floor and your ceiling. So if you have $1 million of investable cash, you could buy a much bigger business. Rule of thumb, think around 20% equity, or about 20% of the size of the purchase you would need to use an SBA loan to buy a business. So if you have liquidity, you could sell stocks, or you're able to access home equity or retirement funds, or you have cash saved up. If you want to buy $1 million business, we're talking about, you should have $200,000 set aside already to invest, like liquid, in something liquid that can be invested. So to do that, you got to look at how much you spend and how much you make. And if that is out of balance, you can't become an entrepreneur with that out of balance. If you're spending more than you make going into entrepreneurship, that is really, really bad news. It's going to be very difficult, even for a lender, to give you money to buy the business, much less you to be successful in the early years. So getting your money right, establishing a financial plan, and make sure you're ready for the acquisition. It doesn't matter the size. You could buy a $100,000 business. You could buy a $10 million business. Just make sure that you have the liquidity to make that investment for. That's going to save you a lot of headache and time, and you can make adjustments with your income and your living expenses to get you. It may take 3 years to get credit problems off the books, lower your spending. I've seen people sell their more expensive house to a more modest house. People move from one part of the country to another to get their expenses in line so they can take the risk of starting or owning a business. The second phase is the search. Identifying which business, and there's a lot of different mechanisms out there to do that, but really it's about your investment thesis, which is what we were talking about what type of business. It doesn't make sense to look at a fitness business, a manufacturing business, and a medical practice. That's all over the place. You got to tighten it in to know what you're looking for more specifically. Once you identify the business, there's a couple of steps in the process. You're going to review something called an executive summary or confidential information memorandum that will give you information about the business, financials, about the employees, the marketing, the type of business it is for you to review, and you will talk to the owner of the business. When you do those two things, you're going to be surprised. You're going to have enough information once you get some practice to make a decision on making an offer. I'm making a distinction between making an offer and buying a business. They're two separate things. The offer is simply if two sides agree to a price and terms for a business. That just gets you into the next phase of due diligence, where you get to go and examine the business, and the owner has the burden of proof to prove their claims of the business. If you find something you don't like, or something that was hidden, or something could become discovered, or you just realize there's a risk that you don't like, you walk away and you move on to the next thing. After due diligence, you will then start to arrange how you're going to fund the deal, whether it's bank financing. There's something called Rob's rollover, where you use retirement funds to acquire a business, and many other funding mechanisms, including seller finance and sometimes all of the above. That's how you secure the financing, and then you go through the process of closing, where you'll use an attorney to draft all the documents and make the legal acquisition of the business, much like you would a house.
Almost every step you identified. I'm very familiar with these steps because we went through them with you, 2.5 years ago. But just for relatability's sake, when we have someone here who's actually a realtor, right? It's eerily similar to buying a house, right?
Yeah.
There's that, where do I want to live? Okay, what kind of size house can I afford? Where am I going to get down payment? Where am I going to get funding? How much are the owners telling me about this place that I'm about to buy? When can I actually go in and look and inspect and see that this is the right place? So should we think about it that way? Because like I said, even being in corporate and having had all these roles, buying a business seems eerily like different, even though it's the same. So is it okay to think about it in that same way? The risk you're taking in buying a house is similar to the risk you're taking in acquiring a business.
It is the one, it really is. The process is very similar from a transaction standpoint. The inspection of the house is due diligence. The same thing. You're inspecting for the roof and the HVAC system and all of that. And you're inspecting the financial credibility. Did they keep good books? Did the bank statements that they have, the credit card statements, their insurance? Have they ever had a employee claim? That, how they get customers? Are they real customers? All of that is your inspection of the business, and there's a process around it, and it's far more easy to do than you may think as you kind of walk through the process. Let me tell you where the big difference is. Valuations. A house, you go in a neighborhood and they'll look at 4 or 5 similar 4-bedroom houses with the same features and so on, and they will come up with a price. And then you go on Zillow and these other things, and it's public information where it establishes the price of a business. So when you're making an offer on it, you can feel pretty confident that this is about what this house is worth, and you're backed up with valuations done by the mortgage company and everything else. Well, for business, the SBA loan company is going to do a valuation on the business too. So you actually have that backup. But the difference is it's harder to establish the value of a business. Now you can go online, and then there's a couple good books that can help you with how valuations are done. But once you understand how businesses are valued, and it's valued as a function of its cash flow in most cases. A business generates $100,000 in cash flow, and it's typically going to be worth a multiple of that cash flow. Most businesses are between 2 to 3 times. So let me make it simple. You want to earn $300,000 a year in cash flow in your business. That's the income you want to put into your pocket. A business like that typically may be valued at about 700,000 up to $900,000 in most cases. Some businesses might be a little bit higher depending on the business and how much profitability is, but as a rule of thumb, 2 to 3 times. So businesses are far cheaper to acquire than you would think. If you think about it for a second, at 2 to 3 times, within 3 years, you could have paid off your investment for the business in 3 years. If it's 2 to 3 times. House is 30 years or 15 years or 30 years. In 3 years, you could have paid off the business entirely in those 3 years. So buying an existing business is a far more efficient way to get into ownership. Now, to create generational wealth, you got to do something more. Once you own the business, all the skills you've learned in corporate America to improve businesses, that is your advantage over the founder that may not have learned that. They're the business, they're running a business, and they're doing the best, but they were not trained the same way to understand costs, lower costs, better marketing, how to handle people and HR and do employee evaluation and customer satisfaction surveys, and how to implement a digital strategy and how to drive efficiency in the business. If you take those skills into a small business, you could increase the profitability and grow the business to the point where by the time you buy it for 900,000, you could build a business that could be worth $5 million in 3 to 5 years. And when you sell it, now you're creating generational wealth.
Perfect. I want to open it up for questions in a few minutes, but I have two trap questions for you, Karl. The first trap question is, okay, I'm sitting down here waiting to, you told me I should wait for my severance, right? Like Google, no, I shouldn't say that. We're on Google Meet, right?
About to say they're recording you, so you get what you wish for.
Yeah. If you think about like where we are, inflation, like take into consideration everything that you see in your line of business, what would you say are the top 5, I don't want to say risk-free, but less risky businesses to acquire, where at least you can anticipate or expect streams of income coming in, either as a function of, hey, this is a compliance issue, so people have to get it done, things like that. Is that something you can help us with?
Yeah, so there are businesses that are more recession proof. I would stay away from fad businesses, things that are hot one moment. I'll give the example of yogurt shops. When Menchie's and Yogli Mowgli and all of them opened up, everyone went from ice cream to yogurt, ran fast, and they opened up on every corner. And if you go and look at the data on it, you'll see they increased, and then they plateaued, and then they started closing. Right, too many opened up, and the market corrected, and now there's still yogurt shops, but a lot of them closed through that. Subway had a similar experience, and some other types of businesses had similar, even gyms. So you want enduring businesses that there's a book called How to Buy a Small Business by Harvard Business Review. So if you Google Amazon, HBR, How to Buy a Small Business is number 1. And the thesis of the book is simply you want enduringly slow growth businesses that grow with population, slow growth, but they're profitable and you don't notice it. An example of that they give in the book of a business that just continued, repair shops, automotive repair shops. So what happens with a repair shop industry? When people have lots and lots of money, they may buy new cars that none of these new cars you can repair, and they need all sorts of maintenance and lights going off, so you have to keep going to these folks. And the good news is the cars are lasting longer because they could find any minute little thing that's wrong with it that needs to be repaired. So they constantly, your car will always live in a shop constantly. When times are hard, people don't buy cars, so they keep their cars longer and they get older. And the older the car gets, the more maintenance it has. By law in Georgia, you have to get emissions tests, and you're going to need changed tires, and you're going to need, things are going to go bad on cars. They're big moving part machines, always need repair. Now, if you've noticed, you can go to a dealership, right? They're geared and they want to suck you in after they buy that car, but they charge a whole lot more money for the repair. You go to an independent person, those businesses just make money. And it's functionally, whatever the parts are, they mark it up, and the labor is the guys that work there. They just charge you labor. So they always make a profit. They never lose money. So auto repairs, home services. So think of macro trends. If you go to any, if you follow the economists, and they'll talk about macro trends that are happening currently, the aging of the US. And so one business that's good is anything dealing with the aging. There's not enough homes and places and people to serve the aging population that's happening. The baby boomers, 72 million people that are retiring at a rate of 100,000 people every day is retiring from the baby boomer. And they need all sorts of services from home health. They travel more. So some of the catering to aging traffic is really popular as too. The third is home services. So you're going to notice a theme along this. I said cars because cars are getting older and aging. I said people because people are getting old and ages. The third is property, building. The US in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and if you're here in Metro Atlanta, the 90s, post Olympic, the explosion for Forsyth County was horse farms. And now people live. Alpharetta is grown. As that housing stock got built in the 90s, so if you count 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, the 2020s, these houses are 30 to 40 years old. That big stock of houses, both commercial and residential, are aging. They all need remodeling. They need floors. They need roofs. They need, um, and even the houses, the electrical system, the code has changed, and a lot of those things. So anything in those home services, because it's an aging stock. The fourth would be home services on things that just keep coming back, like bugs, lawn care. Every year the grass keeps growing, so it needs service. Not an easy business necessarily to run, but it's not going anywhere. Every year someone needs pest control. They need servicing their lawns. Even home cleaning is continuing to grow. People have been outsourcing that as well. But those are things that people just need. And then adjacent to that is, beauty and personal care. Hair keeps growing, so gotta cut it. Hair needs styling, needs to get new styling. Nails and all of those. That's why you see so many of those. That's why they do make a lot of money. Those are businesses that'll continue. If I had to pick the last business, that is, I would say a e-commerce type of business, but you can't compete with Amazon. But if you have a really good everyone pandemic went e-commerce, went to there. But think about service data information that can be done over e-commerce. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine just recently acquired a company that services professional organizations that need certification. So think of doctors. They need to do CE credits all the time, and they have a business that manages it for the Georgia Department of Dentistry, the Alabama Department of whatever. Their members need to do CE credit. So they deliver training on an online platform. They have to keep their membership so that they can get the training to keep their license so they can keep earning. You can see that's a trap. They can't quit it because they won't get the CE credits to be able to earn the money. And so efficiently delivering that. Now, what does that business look like fundamentally? You don't need a building, that cost is gone. You don't need a lot of employee if it's digital training. A lot of your training is done digitally. So your labor cost has dropped down. So people charge recurring revenue for a service that allows them to earn more money. It's a nice business. That's a specific example, but I would look at broader applications of that same business model.
Wow. I've written so many notes, man. All right. I'll open it up. I mean, we didn't get that many people today, but I'm sure between Agi, Joanne, Alice, I think I saw Leo join. You have quite a crowd here. Open it up for questions. And also, as people think about questions, I also want you to think about like the exit strategy for current business owners and what they should be looking at as they think about exiting. But anyone with questions for Karl?
Hi, Karl.
Hello.
Hello, this is Aggie. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. So I just wanted to hear more about the business you mentioned about the doula services. So the person who created the training to certify doulas is the one that sold to someone else?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So it's not like they're franchising, the person
No.
bought the business completely.
Bought the business. She built the business to start doing this, and then she created training. So let's say there's 25 modules of what to do from beginning to end. And then folks would take certification and have to maintain certification. And so what happens is if someone is looking, she has one of the larger sites or wherever when you would go search if you're in Hawaii or New York. Here's what's smart about the business model. She's not catering to the consumer that needs a doula. She's catering to the professionals that want to generate an income from being a doula and offering something that they need to be able to earn that income. So they won't stop being a member of her organization because they won't be able to maintain their certification and be highlighted on their site and do other things to earn their money. So they're locked in, and she has a really high retention rate.
That's cool. Never thought about that. I knew about doulas, but I didn't know how they go about it and trained.
And then you could add on services. So let's say you built that, and now you've got this population of 500 to 1,000 doulas. Well, other revenue income is there are people that would want to market to them and sell services and products to them. So she can monetize that. In the business like that, you have healthcare companies and organizations like Walmart, employees that for it's cheaper to use a doula than to go the other route. So employers are incenting employees that want to use that. They'll cover the cost of that because it's lower than them going many visits and so on to a hospital. And so you're creating partnerships with those organizations where they can access qualified doulas through this organization as an income stream. Insurance companies that want to start offering this service to people would partner and pay. So if you think of the model, really smart way of doing it. But what I'm suggesting to everybody here, I love people that want to come up with new concepts and so on. That's great. If you go out and inquire, a concept is already created. The market has been proven. The customer has been proven. The service has been proven. And it's cash flowing day one. Now, you could take that and bring your digital strategies and take it international. If you have international, there are countries that use more doulas than the United States. Imagine if this service was available in those countries. There's no one else doing that today, certifying doulas internationally. So that's the way to think about. You could still be the innovator entrepreneur. Just start with a base business with cash flow to cover your cash flow needs while you innovate the business model of the business you acquire.
Okay. My other question was on the licensing and CE credit for medical healthcare professionals. Are any of those like pre-recorded or is it live instruction?
They offer multiple different ones. So today with Zoom and everything else, you can if everyone learns differently. Some people, because of time, wants a module that they go through and they click through and they get it that way. Other people may want to go one where there's a facilitator at a certain time and they do their 1 hour and they get their hour of credit with the person. Some just want to read about it and they may go into something and they read it, they pass a test and they get their credit. So it has the flexibility to offer different types of courses that meets the members' needs.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Joanna put something in the notes here. She said, I think this was in reference to when we were talking about layoffs, and she said layoffs are a redirection or permission to pivot. So
yeah, that I want everyone to get excited about getting laid off. That's my mission. You just got to have a plan and don't be surprised by it and know what you want to do. Now, if you want to stay as an employee, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. That is absolutely a great decision to make. Just be intentional with it. You do that. You still need a financial plan. You should still make sure you save enough for retirement and for all the things you need to do in your life. And so that is a. But there will be times where you may have to take step backs and pivot, even if you want to stay an employee. Network. So many people get comfortable in their company. I'll share a personal experience. I worked in a division that was in the aerospace for almost 12-ish years, 10, 11 years. And at the end of my time there, I looked and I went to LinkedIn and I looked at my network, and everyone in my network was in aerospace. The company I work for, the customers I work for, it was so concentrated in one industry, and I had no desire to stay in aerospace the rest of my life. So I'm trying to, as I left that and I went to, I remember there was about a 4-year period that I would not connect to anyone that worked at my old company anymore. Forced me to connect with other people. Fast forward to starting something where I'm dealing with small business owners. I had to rebrand myself from a guy that was somewhat affiliated with aerospace to someone. And for one full year with intention, I had to do specific things to rebrand how people knew me and what they knew me as. What I'm saying, if you're working today, even if you want to stay an employee, figure out ways to broaden your network. You can do it through volunteering with charity organizations, joining professional groups, joining women, men, employee resource group. Find ways to diversify your network. That'll protect you if the job shift happens. But for the rest of you that want to jump into entrepreneurship, starting to have your plan ready. It's like a go bag, ready to pull it. If they said tomorrow's your pink slip, the next day you should start talking to business owners to make offers. You should be that far along the process, ready to pull the trigger.
So, Karl, a lot of us haven't had the benefit of understanding of the training, right, to understand how to acquire business, fund a business, etc. And a lot of the people here and who attended these sessions, like I said earlier, 90% women. So there's sort of a minority element there. 100% Black women. Well, maybe 99.95% Black women. So put another category there. Probably there's an immigrant element or first-time business owner element. So what are those resources that are available for all of us? Because we have that, double minority to our advantage. And we live in Atlanta, most of us. What are resources that you can share where we can get this information to help us through this process?
Yeah, so the first thing I learned on this, there's a lot of book learning that people can do and information from those types of sources. And so, there's a book list that can help. There's a book called Adondo Investor that I highly recommend people read. If How to Buy a Small Business is one, Adondo Investor helps explain how, if you think of hotels in the US, most of the hotels, I think the number is north of 75%, are owned by individuals that come from one particular part of India. And you may hear the joke of the Patels in Gujarati, India. It tells you their strategy of how they built that network. Now, if a group from a portion of India can dominate an industry like hotels, small hotels, there's immigrants from Vietnam that, if you go into any community, dominates nail salons. They're able to do that. So the question is for us, what industries can we move into and learn to dominate kind of collectively and build those networks? So I'll tell you what the secret of what they use each other. They build mastermind groups. They don't call it that. But the guy that bought the next hotel learned from his brother, cousin, friend who owned a hotel. Think of the power of that. If you acquire a business and you become successful in it, imagine if you reach back and grab someone out of the matrix, pluck them out of the matrix, and help them learn side by side. They may work with you or for you, and then you push them out into the world to do their own. That's how they did it. I think there's an opportunity for us to do that by forming cohorts, holding each other accountable. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, form a cohort of 20 of you, and you make commitments to each other. By the year 2025, we are going to be our own boss. And so where you are, everyone's going to be at a different step in the journey. Some are ready now with funding in place, everything, and they know what they want to do. The other 19 might just be supporting that one to get off and go. And then in that first year, 2 become 18 or left. The next year, 6 go, and they pull them along and keep doing it. And once you start getting into year 3, you reach back and you help the next person come along. So using communities, and so there are parts of some of these are already out there. There are peer-to-peer groups that serve that function, that allow people that will support you. I want to share with you another resource. New Majority Capital is an impact investment group that is working to train BIPOC entrepreneurs on how to acquire businesses. Their third cohort is launching in next week, the 5th of February in DC. They wrapped up in November the Atlanta cohort. The first cohort was in Rhode Island. There are anywhere between 35 to 39 entrepreneurs in each cohort. And I've been working with several of them. Today alone, I think I talked to 3 of those entrepreneurs, all making offers, trying to acquire business. Each one of those groups are holding each other accountable. They're helping each other to acquire, they're learning. And one of them was on a buyer call where he's interviewing the business owner to learn more information to determine if he wants to make an offer. I was so impressed by the quality of the question he was, how prepared he was. And the owner afterwards will say, I'm so impressed by that individual. If he makes an offer, even if they're the offer, I suspect she might choose him. And he got that way, kind of iron sharpening iron, by working in these cohorts over a number of weeks. Refining his pitch, refining what he's looking for. He could articulate it very well. He knew what questions to ask. He understood the financials and the customers and the market of that business. So really using each other as personal support is, I think, the fastest avenue for us all to be collectively successful in our journey.
So New Majority Capital, do you foresee them having another cohort in Atlanta, and how can we find out about them?
Yeah, my intention is to make sure they have one in Atlanta, probably in the fall time frame again. And I'd love to share with folks. And if anyone follows me on LinkedIn and so on, you will see I will post when they're having those and make sure people are aware. But they do an outstanding job of helping people learn how to acquire. And their differentiator is they help with funding. Even the equity funding, the 20% I mentioned, they're trying to eliminate any barriers. So if there's a gap between what the entrepreneur can have in equity and the ability, there's a gentleman that made an offer of $12 million on a healthcare center business this year. And he got investors lined up to help him acquire that business. So they're pulling together investors as well to make some acquisitions.
Awesome. Let's see. I see Aggie, John, Alice, Teresa. Thanks for joining. Rose, Leo, Susan.
Can I jump in here real quick? Karl, this has been a really informative session. I appreciate your time. Could you go back for a moment and speak more on rebranding oneself, especially as you transition from corporate to entrepreneurship? Like, what are the steps to hit, or what are the high-level points we should consider?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rose. And that one surprised me a little bit. So although I started off in engineering, I somehow ended up in marketing through my career. And I noticed that. And then when I started in business brokerage, the first month I went and had to get business owners to trust me to represent them when I've never sold a business before. And so one of the things we were trained, and we had mentors that helped guide us. And when we got stuck, we could phone a friend. That piece helped. But my challenge was, I'm going to go after a client against a 25-year seasoned business broker that's done a ton of deals. So what I did was I went to the trade association, Georgia Association of Business Broker. At the beginning, I would go to their meeting and sit in the back and just watch them, listen. And they were older white men, pretty much the entire room. I think I was the only Black person in the room for about a year or more. And they would all say some version of the same thing. I picked me because I've been doing this for so long. Pick me because I've been doing this for so long. Pick me because I've done deals that were so big. So I said, if a client is making a decision based on how long someone's doing that, I won't win. So I said, how do I level the playing field today if I'm sitting up against someone? So I use social media as a tool, and I started posting and sharing and linking and developing domain expertise, thought leadership, that my gentleman friend of 65 years that's been doing it for 40 years never heard of social media. So he would keep claiming, I've been doing it for so long, and I would be using information to show I know more than he knows. So when I had the battle, I don't have to battle how many years. Let's talk about what do I know. And then it morphed into what do I do? So as I'm sharing what I know, I start demonstrating I'm closing deals, I'm helping people close deals, I'm doing that. So I become known as a broker person versus engineer, marketing, sales leader, aerospace guy, all these other things that all my social media would have indicated was who I was. I literally had to outpost in the digital world that to give me footing. And then the second thing is I set goals for myself. I need to start winning awards in this new profession as fast as possible. And so I figured out what were the ways they recognize business brokers, and I made sure I set those at gold and hit them. So I started winning, top broker in this organization, top broker in that organization. 3 of the last 5 years, I've been in the top 5 in all of Georgia. I've only in my 5th year of doing this. There's only been 2 years that I didn't make the top 5 brokers in Georgia. And so the sum of all of that is I call it reframing the conversation. If they're talking about how long someone's been doing something, I've been doing roofing for so long, I've been doing manufacturing for so long, you can't win that conversation. You don't have the years. So change the conversation. How much do you know is different than how much do you share about information? How much do you volunteer or you do other things? Or how do you hit goals or win awards or be recognized for what you do today, even if you haven't been doing it for a long time? Does that make sense?
It does. So my follow-up question then would be, what was your timeline? Did the timeline evolve with as you got more recognition? So were you building it up stepwise as you learned more, then you figured a way to pivot and pivot and pivot until 5 years later you look back and say, hey, this is how far I've come, versus like I'm trying to understand your strategy of approach to be able to fully rebrand.
Really intentional. So go back to marketing 101. I'm trying to get from X to Y by Z. That's what I was trying to do. How many people did I have to meet and explain what is a business broker, what is Transworld, and who is Karl? So in the first year, I measured I did over 500 coffees with gate openers, people that advise business owners, accountants, lawyers, commercial realtor people, insurance people, anyone that was in the ecosystem of business owners. In my first year, as I was building up the practice, I would go and so if you're doing 500, to give you an idea, there's 50-ish weeks in a year. That's 10 coffees. And by the way, I don't drink coffee. We call it coffees, but it's one-on-ones. And so to do that, some of my one-on-ones were 3-on-1s and 4-on-1s. I would invite 4 people to coffee and we chat and learn about each other and make sure they understand 4 things. What does a business broker do? Who is Transworld? Who is Karl? And how I can help them, not how they can help me. Those 4 things was my mission in every one of those coffees. So what happened after a year? There's 500 people out there in the community that knows who Karl is, knows what a business broker is, knows what Transworld is, and knows ways Karl can help them. I changed the company. They didn't talk about how long Karl was doing this, how many deals Karl sold. I intentionally changed the conference because I had no choice. I had to do it fast because remember, I left my job. I had 2 kids under 3 years old. My wife, it didn't work. We had no other income. There was no choice but to make this work. So I just compressed and accelerated it. Within 6 months, the dialogue of who I was started to change. I'll give you another example along that. So rebranding, the first thing I did, I started a podcast called Capitalist Sage. And I started interviewing people in business, related business, people that were expert in networking, people that were bankers and lenders and lawyers and everything that I think a small business owner never has the chance to sit. The concept was, imagine if you were a small business owner and you could be a fly on the wall listening to an expert that you can't afford to pay. So accountant, a tax planning person, marketing experts, all of those, I would invite them to be on a podcast. So I'm building credibility with them because I'm doing something for them. I'm giving them a platform, but I'm the business broker guy that's having these people on. Within a matter of months, people would come up and say, hey, you're the business broker guy. So the point of all of that, there's a specific example that explain a kind of larger approach to rebranding. Come up with tactics and plan that changes the dialogue to the message you want people to hear, and do it a lot.
Understood. Those examples were really good. Thank you.
So along those lines, thanks Rose for asking that. I'm thinking about, so going back to compare by purchasing a house versus acquiring a business, right? A house has fundamental things that most people understand. There's not that many variables, right? There's size, location, etc. But being in business brokerage, you've already given us 5 or 6 completely different businesses, from yoga to the guy who's putting, the construction, slow down people, to the home health, to hospitality, and so on and so forth. How do you then position yourself as an expert in each of those businesses as you talk to both buyers and sellers?
So one of it is, when you talk about passion and trying to find a business with your passion, I don't earn money from my knowledge of business per se. I earn money from helping 2 parties complete a transaction. That's how I get paid dollars. But my passion is business. I'm a business nerd, self-admittedly. I read every issue of Business Week for probably 5 years. I read Harvard Business Review since I left college for 10 years. I study businesses, business model. I understand finance, how money is converted from revenue into cash flow, inside and out. I can read a P&L, a balance sheet, a cash flow statement. All of those types of things are things that I've developed expertise in. So what I do is when I meet a business owner, I want to understand. Tell me about your business. Tell me why'd you start it. And I'm trying to figure out, do they even understand why they're successful? How is it that they're able to beat their competition and produce more cash? And in some cases, they're not. They have no idea. I'll give an example of my passion kind of expressing itself. I worked with a client that had a really strong business that generated really good cash flow, was under contract, about to close with the bank, and then turned in a really bad quarter of numbers that killed the deal. I went through and looked at the numbers, and the numbers wouldn't make sense. For some reason, if someone generated $1 million in a year and didn't spend that much, why would it not appear in the bank account? His bank account was decreasing. So there were ways to figure out. You could do capital and inventory and accounts. There are business things that can cause that. But I was able to go through and look and rule out all of that. And what it left with was, it feels like there's fraud or embezzlement going on. I said, I can't explain it any other way. And so I wouldn't let it go. And I got him to hire an accountant to come in and redo his P&L and books from scratch. Go to the bank statements, go and find where all the money went. And he just called me today. I told him, I said, it feels like him. He says, no, I don't think. His bookkeeper was stealing from him. And we found it. And he had no idea. She was paying herself. She wasn't cashing insurance checks that were coming in that we're doing. And we were able to find that. Now, I share that with you because my passion, I like problem solving and I like business. This was a puzzle that didn't make sense. And so me applying my expertise into this particular area helped this particular business. I make no money for doing that. There were no transaction to be had. But my conversation with him today was, Karl, I want to hire you to meet with me once a month and to help me review my books. We changed all the bookkeeper. They're firing. They're going to try to throw her in jail, and police is involved, and all that stuff is happening. And I said, by the end of the year, we're going to sell your business. And he will refer other business owners to us to continue to help. So I think the most important thing is, if you could find a way what you're passionate about and be able to apply that in your business, that's not the way you make money, but find the things that you enjoy. I think that's one way that could help.
Okay. We've been here for a while. I appreciate the time you've spent with us, but I have this last question for you. As we exit, pun intended, tell me about exiting your business, right? So now I'm in, I've started this business. It's thriving. When is a good time to exit a business? When's a good time to sell a business? Should we hold on personally to that business, right? You know, I think my buddy Leo is here, and he knows how personally I held to this car that I had, right? Like, I love this car. It's the car of my dreams. I've had it. And you tell me, bro, it's time to let it go. And I imagine that's the same thing we have when we have, especially our first business, right? We love it. Is the American dream acquisition, letting go, moving on?
Yeah. So it really starts with day one of your business. If you ever watch Shark Tank, the TV show on CNBC and NBC now, they'll go through a pitch, explain how beautiful and great their product is. They let the judges and the people, investors, taste it and try it. And then they talk about valuations, and they ask them, what's your exit plan? They start with that. So if an entrepreneur, go back to what we started with, an entrepreneur is someone that takes the risk to make money. Two ways to make money. You can generate an income from your business and make money, and you can increase the value of the business asset, just like your house appreciating over time. So your choice is when you start, what is your exit strategy? And so once you sign up to that, then the way to plan for an exit is figuring out what if you had a board of directors you reported to, and you should have one informally if you own a business, people that'll give it to you straight and you can go to for an advice in general. But if that board of directors gave you the charter to increase shareholder value, what decisions would you make in your business? And the reason that's helpful is you are the shareholder. So when you talk about exiting, shareholder is the value of your business. You need to know the value of the business each year. You need to start at day one with your business plan and say, at the end of year one, I'm going to make this much money. My business is going to be worth X. Guess where that's done every single day? You might have heard of it, the stock exchange. You know every day how much Google is worth. You know every day how much Apple is worth. You know every day. And so you could see if it's going up or down, and you can make decisions whether you want to hold on to it or your business is no different. You don't need it every day. It doesn't change every day, but every year you should have a sense. So once you do that and you set a goal, your exit plan should have a time frame and various exit points along that time frame. I use the rule of thumb every 3 to 5 years. So when I started my business, I had a 3 to 5 year of what I thought the business would be worth. And I had this scenario where it was worth nothing as a terminal value, or it had some value. And I back calculated what did the business need to do to be at that value. And then I get to make a decision at the end of that 3 to 5 year span. I go, stay, go. I know how much it's worth. And I built the business ready to be exited at that point in time. If I said, nope, double down, stay, because this is a better use of my time and resources, I may go another 3 to 5 years, and I set new goals. So it starts with a plan and understanding what your business is worth. Now, once you have to do that, you now have to have good financials to know your score. What is your scoreboard? How did you do this quarter? And I'm not just saying revenue, I'm talking how much cash did you produce as one dimension. So if you look at 2 dimension is quantity of earning, how much you're making. And the second dimension is what are you putting into your business to make it more valuable to a potential buyer? Are you building in a sales system so it's not dependent on the owner? Are you training and developing a leadership team that can run the business? So here's in summary, if you're planning an exit, here is the trick. I've done a ton of deals where I've gotten business owners in excess of 4 times the multiple, which is very high for a small business. And what they've done effectively in each one of those cases, they built a business that is highly desirable for an investor or a PE firm or someone. And here's the number one trait that they all had in common. The business owner barely works in the business. He's golfing, traveling the world, buying racing cars. He's got this great, successful cash flow producing business, and he barely works in the business because he built a business. Think of it as a box. He built a business that was a system that produced cash. Guess who that looks like? Remember that old man I showed you before, Warren Buffett?
Yeah.
Doesn't make candy. He built businesses and picked leaders, acquired businesses and picked leaders to run them. And he's not working in any of those businesses. Those businesses are worth the most. So if you build a business that doesn't depend on you, is generating high cash flows with good growth trend and is sustainable, that's how you maximize value. And you'll be daring yourself not to exit.
I'm done, Karl. I think I'm ready. I'm ready for the severance. I'm ready to come to you and source those businesses and see which ones are prime and ready for acquisition. I'm ready to make a decision not with my heart, but guided by the investment opportunity that's there. Folks, leave it open, a couple of more minutes in case any of you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll let Karl go. Any lingering questions?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to add on to it. I don't know if you have feedback on this, but I think a lot of cultural norms, right? So a lot of the things you've said, I think, fit a box that with us, let me just give you a good example of what I'm thinking here is that, for instance, you know, for many of us, business is tied into our culture, right? So some of the decisions you make may not necessarily be normalized within the same context of start, run, exit, right? There's, some folks actually believe they need to build something for their kids or legacy or what that is, right? Um, Being in this country as long as I've been, one of the few things I think I had to overcome was the cultural nuances around my mentality with regards to how I approach business, right? And I don't know if it's the same for you, you know what I mean? Because, being as, now that I understand some of the nuances around African Americans in the US as well, I think it's a mindset, right? So it's something you said, I'm trying to contextualize really in an interesting way, but it's almost this argument around are entrepreneurs made or born, right? And then a lot of business folks sort of argue this out where again, me and Stephen go back and forth. Is where Stephen's brain can't think of the idea of entrepreneurship, starting something from scratch, whereas for me, I don't think I was born that way. I think I was forced that way because the circumstances that I encountered or endured made me become a certain way. But there's a cultural norm that we have to overcome, most of us, especially as folks from the diaspora, which is trying to figure out whether this is a thing that, am I starting a business to survive? Or am I starting a business to thrive? I think that's actually a good way to think about it. And thinking about your position, one of the few things I wanted to ask really is, because you said something that is just sticking to me, was what's your definition of a good business, right? Like, what are you looking at? Are you looking at pure numbers? Strategically, what do you guys place on your site as a good listing for, entrepreneurs or business folks to get into?
It's in the eye of the beholder. So I would not consider this doula a good business because I'm like, oh my gosh, that is so niche, that is so specific. But sometimes some of the best businesses, it depends on your goal. If you desire to be a stay-at-home mom with flexibility to go drop kids off at school and so on, what's a good business for that person is different than a person that's looking to really, get to $1 billion in sales, right? You got to make different choices and pick different industries to be able to do that. So part of that is but what I consider a good business is that it is, number one, clearly it is generating cash flow or has the potential to generate a strong cash flow. And it's well priced. I have businesses that are actually, I've got one new one recently that actually is making no money at all, not a single dime. The business is a brewery. It has probably $700,000 worth of equipment, and somebody's going to acquire that business for probably $300,000. Now, it makes no money. It has revenue, but it's not making money. And there's a ton of reasons why. There's debt load and that they have to cover, and they made bad decisions, and their marketing is terrible, and so on. But it's like I approach that business. Is that goodness big, good or bad? It depends on the buyer. If my expertise is like this equivalent of flipping houses, if I have an expertise of buying an undervalued asset, knowing how to make the improvements of it, and do it, spending $300,000 and being able to implement changes into a business that then makes the business worth $2 million in 3 years, that's a good buy for me because I have a skill set that I'm bringing to that. If I don't have that skill set, that's not a good buy. If I'm not good at it, if I've never done it or I don't know how to do it, I need a cash flowing business that I, just put my hands at the wheel and hopefully don't screw up. But if I'm good at HR and I see this business is lacking HR, if I'm good at marketing and sales and this business is lacking marketing and sales, I see how it's already good. I can see how I can improve it more, or I can have access to channels or new markets, or I can innovate it. So a good business really is in the eye of the beholder, but it always starts with if I take it where it is today, what does my business plan say I can make it look like, and what's my confidence of getting there? And make sure I don't pay a penny more than is a fair price for the business. And I'm not saying a cheap price, I'm saying a fair price.
There were
Fair
so
enough.
many. Sorry, go ahead, Leo.
No, I'm just saying fair enough. It's a fair answer.
Yeah, there's so many gems dropped right there, right? So actually, Leo, earlier when we started, we were talking about like the cultural shackles, and Carl talked about being, first generation immigrant from Jamaica, and not having an exemplar, right? In the US, you said it really well, and I think I think Gene talked about it, or someone else talked about it previously, where people are third or fourth generation business owners. So this is like part of the course for them, right? For us, it's a complete cultural shift. And then on top of that, to sort of a little bit of Leo's point, but okay, we're getting this business because traditionally the name carries on, right? Like the name carries on with that business. But here you're saying, yeah, that's fine. If that's what you intended to be, that's cool. But then this thing needs to generate cash. You need to go in thinking about exiting. You need to think about it as an investment opportunity. You need to think about it as something that makes you money, even though it's not something you're passionate about. You need to rebrand yourself and stop being associated probably with your traditional brand, because this business needs to thrive on the brand that you create around it. Like there's so many things over here. I don't know about the rest of you, but even just this one conversation has made me think, wow, maybe I was looking at things differently. Maybe the reason Leo and I fight about this thing all the time is because I'm stuck on finding something that A, I'm good at, B, I'm passionate about. But those are not necessarily the things that make a business a good investment.
I think you're hitting on something, and the cultural element is something I see. So a lot of my friends, are from Jamaica and Caribbean in general, through college and through work. And so you work in companies and you always find folks that look and sound like you and have similar experience. And I've been passionately going after them and unlocking them from the matrix one by one. I go find them and I put them on a path, and I force them to think about it. And I force them to get ready for it. And it's because the conditioning that they had all their life, they were hearing one message of the way to get a good job and move up in a company and get to wealth. And guess what? They were winning. Why would you change a winning formula? If you've been succeeding and you're living in $1 million house and you're making money and you've had more money than your family ever had before, and you're traveling and your kids are in private school and you are winning. Here's the difference. Here's the reframe. Change the goalpost. That's what unlocked me. I thought I won already. I thought I won 10 times. And once I started understanding, I need to change the goal. Every time you break through a ceiling, you need to set a new ceiling. And so when it was just thinking about making money, okay, I break through it, I make some money. Okay. I start challenging myself to build legacy. I have a goal. I'm talking, I want to see 100 millionaires created of business ownerships. That's my personal goal. I want to put 100 Black entrepreneurs that are millionaires before I die. And so, I mean, it's clear as day. And I said, if I do that, it's not just for pride or anything like that. How does that change their families and their communities? When there's 100 Black millionaire business owners in all the communities that they're in, guess what their children is going to start looking like? Their 2 to 3 kids are going to become 2 millionaires or 10 millionaires and learn how to be entrepreneurs and learn business skills, because they're going to work with their dad and their mom. They're going to learn, and they're going to do better for them. They're going to change their community. The kid that's their neighbor is going to get an opportunity to come work for them, and then he's going to push them out in there and help them start. And then when we start acquiring more wealth, guess what we're doing? The next level for me, I'm investing. I'm Warren Buffett, investing in all of these and helping them become more and do more. I'm not working in the business anymore. I become an investor and we become investors. And that's how you accelerate this shift. And I did not make this up. The Patels from India did it. If you go into any of the ethnic communities all around the world have done it. They work collaboratively. One or two start the shift, and then they help bring other people following the same path. That's what we got to do. That's the work.
Love it. Love it. What was the name of that book you talked about, the Patels?
The Dando Investa, DHANANDO.
Okay.
Investor. But if you step back and you look at that, but we've got to reframe the messages in our head that we heard of how to get to, what does success look like? And it's easy for us to think individually, I'm going to get my kids through Harvard and do X, Y, Z. That's fine. That is great. But as you're achieving these things, change the goalposts. How do you continue to move up and forward in a way that brings others along? So this entrepreneurship, that we do not own businesses in the US in particular in any mass. We have a lot of self-employed 1-2 people businesses. We don't own businesses with people with 5 or more people. If you don't have businesses with 5 or more people and capital equipment and so on, you don't have a business that's producing cash flow without the efforts of the owner. If you don't have that kind of business, you can't scale the business. If you can't scale the business, you can't have businesses that can produce legacy wealth.
You heard it here first. You heard it here first, Karl.
Jobs. Get out of those corporate jobs if you can. You're too talented. You're too good. Your talents are not being utilized, and you're not going to get the return on the efforts. You only have a finite amount of time. If you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s, you got, if God blesses you, you got 50 years, maybe 60 years. How do you want to spend it?
Okay. No. I don't have any answer to that question. I'll marinate on it. I'll look at the red. I'll look at the red and the blue, and I'll come back and you'll see which one I've taken.
That red pill is real. So, well, thank you guys for allowing me to share some of this with you, and hopefully you can sense my passion around it. But I really do think there's lots of opportunity, and if I can help in any way, feel free to reach out to me. You can share my contact, follow me on LinkedIn, Karl Barham. My website for Transworld is www.tworld/Atlanta Peachtree. On there, we got all sorts of tools for entrepreneurs. You can go in there and sign up for our buyer match. You set your criteria, and it will send you different businesses that fit your criteria just for you to start looking at and exploring. You don't even have to move through the process and sign an NDA. You could just start getting a sense of businesses. Once you start looking at it, you'll get a feel if this is something you want to explore, if it's not. And it may just be not now. It may not be the right time for you in this season of life. But definitely, you've got the talent and the capability to do it. It's just you making that decision, whether you want to take the red pill or just stay comfortable with the blue pill. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Karl. I appreciate you. I dropped it there, and I'll drop it in the Facebook page as well. And thank you all for joining us. I mean, it's been five sessions, and hopefully after these 5 sessions, all of you are able to decide what is the next step for you. I'll set up a few more Wezesha sessions, and let's continue this chat on Facebook as well. Karl, I appreciate you. Thank you all for joining.
All right. Take care. God bless everyone.
See you.